Hello, and a very warm welcome to this unit on or subject on ministry in culturally diverse teams. I think we're going to have great fun together, but we're going to learn a lot as well, and I hope it'll help you wrestle with the issues that you've been facing and maybe other teams you've been watching have been facing of trying to work together and be useful to God. Be an effective instrument in his hands together. One of the questions I love to ask people is, if God poured out his blessing on your lives and ministry together as a team, what would the outcome look like? What would the result look like in, say, 15 years? If you took a picture of the ministry situation in 15 years, what would it look like if God poured out his blessing on you and through you? And a lot of that's about the capacity we've been given by God to work well together. There's a couple of passages that come to mind. Well, there's lots of passages across the scriptures about that relate to teamwork. They may not be exactly about teamwork, but I think they relate to teamwork. One of them's Psalm 133. How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. Then talks about it's like the oil dripping down Aaron's beard, and the dew of Mount Hermon falling on Mount Zion. For there the Lord bestows his blessing, even life forevermore. There's something very special about living in peace with one another and working as a team in peace with one another. The other passage that immediately comes to mind for me is Ephesians chapter 4, where Paul is telling the Ephesians, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. How? Being completely humble and gentle, patient, bearing with one another in love, realizing that there's one body, one Spirit, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all. And that he's given gifts to each one of us, abilities and gifts, and that those gifts are supposed to be used for the extension of the kingdom of God and the building up of our brothers and sisters in the team and beyond, in the church. And yes, and then I love this last verse where it says, or maybe two last verses. This is Ephesians 4:15 and 16. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will, in all things, grow up into him who is the head, that is Christ. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. And that reminds me of, well, obviously, life in the church, church, the local church, the church, churches around the world, but also in Christian teams where as each part does its work, we'll be building one another up in love, and also through us God will be doing things he wants done in the world. Okay, sermon over. My experience, we went to Turkey in 1989, and we expected to be part of a team of what we discovered that people in Turkey were talking about as basketball teams. But they said, Richard, actually, a field of 25 people, it's like an athletics team. Basically, everyone does their own thing, and we meet together for fellowship and to support each other. And you can call that a team if you want to, but I don't call that a team, and you'll be finding that out. I think interdependence is a key part of what being a team is, and some other things we'll talk about. Goals, roles, and souls you'll be introduced to at some point. Anyway, we were expected to be part of a basketball team, and there weren't any basketball teams, so we looked for and longed for and wanted to try and help basketball teams happen, teams that work together in an interdependent way with a common vision and a mutually agreed strategy, and using each other's gifts to the full. And it wasn't until we got to Bulgaria that we were able to start such a team and also help the coming into being of some other teams like that, and supervise some other teams, and that got me interested in what helps teams. And we had, not all of it was perfection by any means. Some teams worked well and some teams didn't work well. We had the great privilege, I've had the great privilege of being part of 3 really, really well functioning teams that I believe have been used by God to His glory in Bulgaria, and then in the UK, and then here in Australia. And my burden has been seeing some teams that haven't been so healthy, and some very unhealthy, to the point of causing team members causing each other, and the team experience causing each other such deep hurt that lasts for a long, long, long time. My burden is to help such teams, and help every team really to become the most effective it can be, and the most glorifying to God that it can be. So it's not, and that led me to doing a doctor of ministry dissertation on multicultural church planting teams, and trying to find the factors involved in them becoming effective, and continuing to think about how to help such teams. I interviewed, firstly I surveyed a whole lot of teams through questionnaires, but then interviewed, I can't remember how many teams, maybe it was 5 teams, something like that, in depth, all the team members, and trying to understand their experience of teamwork, and what things were helping them be effective, and what things they felt were hindrances to their effectiveness. And I tried to measure their effectiveness too, in terms of actually making disciples and planting churches. Okay, and it's not always because of culture that cultural differences that you have problems working together, but that's a serious and major factor in a multicultural team. And it's not necessarily because of unhealthy or difficult team relationships that you're not effective in terms of making disciples and planting churches. You might be working among a really not very responsive people group to the gospel, and maybe nobody's seen much forward movement in terms of people coming to know Jesus and growing in Him. So yes, there are lots of factors in effectiveness. The health of teams is one of them, but I think it's an important one. Multicultural teams have the potential of becoming exceptionally effective and used by God for advancing His kingdom. But they also have the potential for serious long-term conflict that deeply hurts their members, and also can have a negative impact on their witness to God's glory. Okay, a failure to understand cultural differences and learn how to make allowances for these differences or navigate through them is a major reason, I believe, for the ineffectiveness of some teams, and eventually some teams will have to break up, and that's a key reason for that. Of course, there are personal differences as well that aren't so much cultural. That's personality differences, I should say, that are another factor in this, but we're going to be focusing more, at least in this unit, on cultural differences, a little bit on personality. Okay, this week we are going to be, this is the very first week, you're going to be reflecting on your experience of multicultural teams and thinking through what are the benefits of working in a multicultural team, what are the challenges that you've seen of working in a multicultural team. You'll be introduced to a model of multicultural team effectiveness. It may not be perfect, but you can think about that and maybe use it and there's a little bit of an inventory you can use based on that model to think through a team that you've been part of or observed, and work out what you think the 2 or 3 major factors are involved in their effectiveness or ineffectiveness, in that team's ineffectiveness or effectiveness. Okay, I think that's about all I need to say. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to getting to know you all a little bit better through this course. And one of the things you'll be doing is making an introductory video to yourself, which just a few minutes is fine. This is a bit long for me, but I hope you get an idea of who I am in this 10 minutes.